Now, yesterday there was a special election in Montana between Bernie-backed Democratic candidate Rob Quist and tech giant Gianforte, who was recently charged with assaulting Ben Jacobs, working for The Guardian, was a reporter. Now, unfortunately, when that happened, again, it happened a night before the election, it was a little too late for people to be able to change their votes, and unfortunately, Quist lost by a very slim, but what some papers call a comfortable margin. So now, unfortunately, Gianforte is now replacing Ryan Zinke's seat. So that is unfortunate. Now, look, I know there's a lot of people who are following this that are very, very disheartened. I understand. I completely understand. Now, I think personally this was a very winnable race. I think there's a lot of people on the progressive side who would agree, some on the establishment side that were like, no, it was not a winnable race. You're in red Montana. Trump won by over 20 percentage points. No, of course, no, progressive's not going to win, especially somebody who's far left, like wants Medicare for all. No, this guy was going to lose. He was going to lose big. Well, early polling did suggest that he was going to lose by a sizable margin. And then as the race got a little closer, it really started to tighten up. And it actually got very close, and that's when people started paying attention. So, again, I think this was a winnable race. And in fact, just a few days before the election, Quist was polling only a couple of points behind and getting very, very close. Now, that itself shouldn't have happened as far as the GOP was concerned. So they got scared. They flipped out, and they started spending millions and millions of dollars to defend the seat. In fact, you had outside groups. This isn't just money that Gianforte raised on his own. This was outside spending only. Outside groups spent over $6 million on this race, with 90% of it going to Gianforte. Now, where were the Democrats? Well, they were almost entirely absent when it came to this. Quist was able to raise a lot of money. He raised $5 million. And that's from small donors only. He wasn't taking big corporate money. So he showed that he could raise lots and lots of money, that he could be a powerhouse, not relying on outside groups and corporations. Unlike Gianforte. Now, of course, the Republicans, they spent a lot of money to win by around 6 percentage points in a race that should have been, at least according to the establishment, should have been a blowout for Republicans. That should have a lot of people worried on the Republican side. Like, oh my God, look at all the money that we had to pour into this race that would have been completely obscure. We had to pour all this money into this race in order to fight this progressive, this folk singer, this country singer coming out of nowhere. Now, where the hell did Rob Quist come from? And how did he catch up so close to the polls? Well, that's because he ran on populism. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, look, man, Rob Quist, he did a good job, but they just weren't gonna vote for him. In fact, it didn't even matter that Gianforte body slammed in a reporter. If they were gonna vote for him anyway, right? Well, that's true in some of them, but the truth is actually that by the time that happened, it was actually too late to affect the vote, because it turns out that a lot of people voted early. Montana actually has a pretty robust early and absentee voting system, which I'm in favor of, but in this case, it worked against Rob Quist. Turns out that people already voted early by mail-in for Gianforte before this entire thing happened. In fact, CNN is reporting that since audio of the scuffle surfaced, Montana Secretary of State office has been getting calls and questions asking if voters who had voted early could come in and change their vote. So attacking Ben Jacobs, as Gianforte did, made some people who voted for him previously go, ooh, maybe, you know what? This guy does not have the temperament that I want. He's going to have to be dealing with the press almost every day, or in some capacity, And he's going to have to deal with questions that are pretty uncomfortable. He can't go around body slamming people. So yeah, I would like to change my vote. Now, unfortunately, you can't do that. In some places, when you do an absentee ballot, when you vote early, you can come in and you could change your vote. Some states actually allow that. Montana is not one of those states. Now, in fact, interestingly enough, to go into this, Missoula County Election Commissioner Rebecca Connors said she got at least a dozen phone calls just this morning from voters wanting to change their vote. She told CNN, had the audio with Jacobs not happened, she would have had 0. So you just had a dozen people, literally a dozen in this case, coming in and saying, hey, can I change my vote? Turns out the person that I voted for is a jackass and might be going to jail because he assaulted somebody. I want to change my vote. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. I don't think she's ever seen that happen before as well. Now, to give you an idea of how some of this could have overall affected the vote, of approximately 700,000 Montana registered voters overall, 37% of them cast their vote early. Now, of course, not all of them would have flipped over to Quist. I'm not saying that. But if a percentage of them had switched over to Rob Quist, well, then it's possible that there might be enough, a few thousand vote out of, 20, 30,000, 40,000 out of 700,000 might be enough to switch. Maybe. You might end up having Rob Quist in that seat. So that is an example of how, in this case, early voting kind of hurt and worked against Rob Quist. Now, I'm not saying get rid of early voting, but that is one of the issues. So, overall point of this is progressives. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. Don't forget that. Now, on the again, this was a loss, okay? But you have to remember that we've been having wins in other places. For example, you had 2 Democrats flip 2 red districts in New York and New Hampshire. And one of those people I talked about, that was Christine Pellegrino in New York. She was a former Bernie Sanders delegate. So there are places where progressives have been notching up wins. Now, unfortunately, that didn't happen in Kansas, which was a high-profile race, and Montana, which became a high-profile race. But in other places, there are progressives that are running and that actually are winning in, Republican districts. And this is not the end of the special elections and the primaries. In fact, we have a lot of them. And the date that I want you guys to watch is I want you guys to watch June 6th. June 6th, there is a lot of primaries that are going to happen around the country. It's a very important day for primaries. So, and if I encourage you guys to look this up. Look up some of the races that are happening in June 6th, some of the primaries, and you won't be surprised to see Bernie Sanders delegates or Bernie Sanders or Our Revolution endorsed candidates running in these areas. And I encourage you to do your research if you're in those areas. And I especially encourage you to get out and vote, because that's actually how you enact progressive change. Now, I know you might be disheartened, right, by some of these losses, and we all are. But you can be damn sure that the Republicans, there will still be out there fighting tooth and nail to defend their seats. Even if you're disheartened, they're still going to be out in full force. And the establishment Democrats will be out as well. Now, you're not going to win all the time, but that's not an excuse not to try. There is a chance, however, I think, hopefully, Quist runs again, for example. Now, I hope he does. But even if he doesn't, maybe another progressive will step up. The whole point is that you have to keep fighting. Even if you lose the first time around, you have to keep fighting and fighting and coming back. I mean, look at Bernie Sanders. He's a good example of that. This guy's been fighting for over 4 decades for things like Medicare for all, living wage tied to inflation, labor rights, etc. And let's be honest, we haven't had a lot of success in that area. But you continue to fight for those things anyway. And Bernie Sanders will keep on fighting, and so should you. And no matter what's thrown in your way. And that's what you have to do. Losing sucks. It is disheartening. But again, if you want to achieve anything, then you have to continue fighting for it. And so that's what I hope progressives can take out of this. That, hey man, this was closer than it should have been in normal circumstances. And that shows the impact of progressives, and it shows the impact of running on those values. And it shows that even in red places, Democrats, progressives can be competitive and maybe in the future even possibly win. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.